Have you ever found yourself in that unsettling pause where you're not sure what the other person is thinking, yet the silence speaks louder than any words? Welcome to a place where unspoken tension can say more than the most passionate argument. Today, we're exploring something that often goes unmentioned: what really happens in a woman's mind when you decide to go quiet on her. If you've ever felt that knot in your stomach when your messages go unanswered, or wondered why she seems so affected by your sudden silence, then you're in the right spot. Picture this scenario for a moment. You've been texting back and forth with someone special, maybe even sharing jokes and playful banter. Then, without warning, you pause, you put your phone down. Hours pass, then maybe a day. The energy changes. You start to feel your own thoughts speeding up, and on her end, a dozen questions might be swirling through her mind. It's not just about the lack of words, it's about the meaning behind that silence. Is it a deliberate choice? Is it anger, frustration, or something else entirely? I remember a time when I decided to take space after a disagreement, thinking I needed peace to gather my thoughts. In my mind, it was a simple step back. But on the other side, that space felt like a sudden, frigid wall. The tension grew like static electricity in the air, making every moment more uncomfortable than the last. That one silent evening taught me a lot about how much power quiet can hold. It's not always that you intend to hurt someone by retreating into silence, but sometimes it does exactly that. Yet this topic isn't only about the darker side of ignoring someone. Sometimes silence can be a necessary reset, a calm in the middle of an emotional storm. It can give each person the chance to breathe and reflect, to understand what they truly feel without the rush of heated words. But there's a fine line between using silence as a moment of clarity and using it as a tool for manipulation. And that's what we'll be uncovering in our conversation today. Before we continue, let me ask for a quick favor. If you find these insights valuable, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world, and it helps us keep these conversations going. Thank you for being here and choosing to spend your time with me. I promise to keep things easy to follow, especially if English isn't your first language. We'll keep the tone light and friendly, as if we're sitting across from each other in a cozy cafe. Let's step into her perspective and figure out what goes through her mind the moment you go silent. There's a fascinating chain reaction that starts the instant she notices you're no longer reaching out. So, take a deep breath and let's move into that next phase. What happens in her mind? First, imagine the scene. The night before, she was smiling at her phone because your texts came in rapid succession, fun, light, and engaging. Then, she wakes up the next day, checks her notifications, and there's nothing from you. Maybe at first, she doesn't panic. She tells herself you're probably busy or caught up in work. Yet, as more time goes by, the silence starts to loom larger in her thoughts. Little by little, the absence of your voice becomes a puzzle she can't help but try to solve. In the early moments, she might feel a flicker of disbelief. He'll message soon, she thinks. There's no way this is on purpose. That fleeting optimism can keep her at ease for a few hours, maybe even a day. She replays your last conversation in her mind, scanning it for any clues she might have missed. Were there any signs of tension or frustration? Did she say something that might have been taken the wrong way? The more she replays those moments, the more she starts to second-guess every little detail. Her mind becomes a detective, combing through fragments of words, emojis, or even the length of your responses. Then the questions shift and become more personal. Did I offend him somehow? Was I too clingy or too distant? If she has a tendency to doubt herself, these worries can multiply. Every scenario seems possible. Maybe you suddenly lost interest. Maybe you met someone else. Perhaps you're mad at her for an unknown reason. The lack of information amplifies her insecurities, and where she once felt comfortable, she now feels on shaky ground. As this internal dialogue continues, her emotional state starts to evolve. Confusion mingles with a pinch of hurt. She wonders if you're ignoring her intentionally or if you're simply occupied and unaware of how much she cares about communication. The uncertainty can be unsettling. At this stage, her ego also begins to speak up. It might say things like, "I shouldn't have to chase him," or "He should value my time enough to let me know what's going on." This inner debate can bring a wave of frustration. It's as if she's standing at a crossroads, unsure whether to reach out again or protect her pride by waiting for you to make the next move. If she does decide to message you, maybe a casual, "Hey, how's your day?" and still gets no response, the doubts multiply. Now, the ego and the heart clash more intensely. On one hand, her heart may be saying, "Reach out again. Make sure everything's okay." On the other, her ego is whispering, "Don't be the one who looks desperate. If he wants to talk, he'll talk." This tug of war can be emotionally exhausting. It's not just about the missed texts anymore. It's about her sense of identity in the relationship. She wonders whether her feelings are being taken seriously and whether this silence is a sign of deeper incompatibility. There's also a more reflective side that sometimes emerges when the immediate confusion settles. In a quieter moment, she might think, "What if this is just a natural pause? Maybe he needs some space to deal with personal issues." This more empathetic angle can give her some peace, at least temporarily. She might decide to give you time, hoping that whenever you're ready, you'll open up about what's on your mind. Still, the worry doesn't completely vanish. It just hides in the background, ready to resurface if the silence continues for too long. Her emotions can shift rapidly during these first days of quiet. One moment, she might feel a surge of anger, telling herself, "I don't need this drama. I'm fine on my own." The next moment she's sad, missing the daily connection and feeling an ache that reminds her how much she actually valued your attention. It's a bit like being on a seesaw, tipping back and forth between frustration and longing. Each swing adds another layer to her growing sense of emotional complexity. Sometimes she confides in a close friend. Maybe she asks, "Do you think he's ghosting me?" Or, "Should I text him again?" The friend might advise her to wait, reinforcing the idea that you should be the one to initiate. Or maybe the friend tells her to just be direct and ask if something's wrong. In either case, this outside perspective can either calm her worries or stir them up further, depending on what's said. Now, she has one more opinion to juggle, one more voice in her head, mixing with her own doubts and hopes. If she has a history of feeling uncertain in relationships, that history will color how she interprets your silence. Past insecurities can resurface, making her even more vigilant about potential red flags. "I've been here before," she might think. "I can't let this happen again." So, she becomes extra sensitive to any sign that something is off. Without a clear explanation from you, her imagination fills in the blanks. This can be dangerous, because once the imagination runs wild, it's hard to reel it back in. Small things take on big meaning. A missed call you didn't return, or a social media post where you seemed happy without her, can trigger an avalanche of worry and speculation. Yet, there is also a subtle recognition, deep down, that the truth might be simpler than her racing thoughts suggest. Sometimes people just get busy, or they need personal space. Still, the longer the silence stretches, the harder it is for her to convince herself that everything's perfectly fine. That initial flicker of disbelief morphs into a larger flame of unease, and she can't shake the feeling that something fundamental has changed. This phase is usually when all those what-if questions start piling up. What if he's testing me? What if I'm reading too much into this? What if our connection wasn't as strong as I thought? There's a unique stress that comes from not knowing which question matters most. It's a flurry of emotions, confusion, frustration, sadness, and sometimes a faint glimmer of hope, swirling together until she can't decide if she should simply move on or hold out for some honest explanation. And here's where the ripple effect begins. That internal storm influences how she talks to you, how she thinks about you, and even how she interacts with others in her life. Some women pull back entirely, convinced they should safeguard their emotions. Others lean forward, trying to bridge the gap by reaching out multiple times, hoping for a reassuring response. Each path carries its own risks and rewards, and she might switch from one to the other in the span of a single day. Now, let's pause for a brief moment and prepare to explore what unfolds when these initial thoughts and questions evolve into a full-blown emotional roller coaster. The early stage of silence is all about shock and self-questioning, but as more time passes, she experiences deeper, more dramatic emotional shifts. Let's move into that next territory, the emotional roller coaster. Close your eyes for a second and imagine you're on a roller coaster, slowly inching up that steep track. In the beginning, there's a hint of tension, a flutter of nerves. That's the early phase of silence, where she's unsure, maybe a little hopeful that it's just a small hiccup. But as you reach the top of the track, suddenly the bottom drops out. This is the moment denial fades away, and the wild ride truly begins. At first, she may cling to the idea that the silence is temporary. He must be busy with work, she tells herself, or he'll call soon because he always does. But as hours turn into days, denial starts to wear thin. A small seed of worry grows into something bigger. She feels it in her chest, a kind of tightness that won't let go. At this stage, the doubt can morph into a quiet panic. Why isn't he reaching out? Is he hurt, upset, or just done with me? Her mind races through every possibility, even the extreme ones that she knows might not be logical. Yet the more she thinks about it, the more real they seem. When denial slips away, anger often takes its place. She might feel irritated that you're ignoring her, upset at herself for caring so much, and frustrated by how helpless she feels. Anger can manifest in unexpected ways. Maybe she snaps at a friend who asks if she's okay, or she becomes short-tempered at work. The anger isn't always directed at you personally. It's sometimes an expression of her own fear and vulnerability. This stage can feel liberating for a moment, as if she's regaining control by channeling her hurt into a defiant stance. If he won't talk to me, fine. I don't need him anyway, she might say, even if deep down she's longing to hear from you. But after that flash of anger subsides, a heavier emotion can settle in, sadness. Picture a slow drop on that roller coaster where you're plummeting into the depths and there's no quick way out. The emptiness of the silence starts to feel overwhelming. She might replay good memories of you two laughing, sharing secrets, or making plans. Each happy memory becomes tinged with the realization that those moments feel very far away now. In this stage, the sadness can be quite profound. Tears might come more easily. Everyday tasks can seem dull or pointless without the spark of your usual connection. She may find herself checking her phone obsessively, hoping for a sign of life from you. And each silent notification feels like a small heartbreak. A natural consequence of prolonged sadness is self-doubt. She wonders if she's truly worthy of someone's consistent attention. Those old insecurities can rise to the surface. Maybe she remembers past relationships that ended in similar fashion. The silence feeds these fears like oxygen to a flame, and the more she thinks about it, the brighter they burn. I always fall for the wrong people, she might tell herself, or this is just my luck. These thoughts can spiral, making the roller coaster drop feel even steeper. Eventually, she may swing toward a phase of bargaining. This is where she might think, if I just reach out one more time and say the right thing, everything will be okay. Or, if I give him space, he'll realize what he's missing. Bargaining is like trying to negotiate with reality. She's looking for a way to end the silent treatment and reclaim the harmony she once felt. During this stage, she may send a carefully crafted text or try to casually bump into you if she knows your routine. Anything to rekindle that spark of communication. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, she returns to the roller coaster, stuck in a loop of heightened emotions and searching for answers. Another twist in this ride is a sense of desperation. When attempts to reconnect fail, or she senses you're still distant, she might feel a pressing need to fix things immediately. This can result in a flurry of messages or calls, a frantic plea for you to at least acknowledge her existence. But once the desperation subsides, a wave of exhaustion usually follows. She feels drained from riding these emotional highs and lows with no clear resolution in sight. In rare cases, she might adopt a defensive coolness. This is a coping mechanism, a way to protect her heart by acting as if she no longer cares. It's a mask that says, "I'm fine, I don't need him, let him stay silent." She might post upbeat pictures on social media or throw herself into social events, showing the world, and maybe you, that she's unbothered. But beneath that surface, the emotional turbulence can still rage on. This facade is more about self-preservation than genuine indifference. Throughout this roller coaster, she might confide in trusted friends or family. Talking it out can bring moments of clarity, but it can also intensify the ride. One friend might say, "He's not worth it, move on," while another says, "He's probably going through something, give him time." These conflicting opinions can pull her in multiple directions. No matter what advice she gets, the silent phone remains a powerful symbol of unanswered questions. And every day it stays silent, the roller coaster continues. Over time, she might reach a point of emotional fatigue. This is a stage where the big ups and downs start to level out into a sort of resigned acceptance. She might still miss you, but she's tired of guessing. She wants to find stable ground again, even if it means learning to live without the contact she once enjoyed. This acceptance isn't necessarily calm or peaceful. It can feel more like giving up hope. Yet it sometimes lays the groundwork for genuine healing, because it's in this space that she can finally focus on her own needs without the constant distraction of what if. Now, let's pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Because understanding this emotional roller coaster isn't only about recognizing her pain. It's also about figuring out what fuels it and how easily things can escalate when silence is used carelessly or with the wrong intentions. This leads us to a crucial point. Many men don't fully appreciate the power of silence. Some even try to harness it in ways that end up backfiring. That's what we'll discuss next. Why most men fail when they attempt to use ignoring tactics, and how this roller coaster can spin out of control. So, hold that thought for just a second, and let's gently move to the next part of this conversation, where we explore the common mistakes and pitfalls that often come with trying to use silence as a strategy. Why most men fail at this. When men decide to go silent, they often do so with mixed intentions. Some are genuinely upset and need space to cool off. Others might be testing how much the woman cares, hoping her reaction will reveal her true feelings. Still, others try to use silence as a strategic move, aiming to spark jealousy or a sense of urgency. Unfortunately, these tactics can easily backfire, leaving both parties feeling more confused and hurt than before. One of the most common mistakes is breaking the silence too early. Imagine deciding to pull away, to make a statement, or to give yourself time to think, only to find that you can't handle the tension yourself. You might send a half-hearted message a few hours later, something vague like, "Hey," just because you're uncomfortable with the stillness. This abrupt reversal can signal uncertainty, and rather than showing calm confidence, it highlights a lack of consistency. The woman might see this as you playing with her emotions. One minute you're distant, the next you're reaching out. The resulting confusion can deepen her distrust or frustration. Another pitfall is trying to use silence as a form of revenge. Maybe she said something hurtful or you felt disrespected. Instead of addressing the issue with calm words, you choose to shut her out completely. This approach can feel satisfying in the moment, but in the bigger picture, it often damages the relationship. When silence is fueled by anger, it becomes a weapon that creates wounds instead of opportunities for resolution. A temporary feeling of power can later give way to regret, especially if the relationship was meaningful in the first place. There's also the approach of trying to trigger jealousy by ignoring her. This is a risky game. The idea is to make her wonder what you're up to, whom you're with, or whether you still care. Some men believe that by staying silent, they can create a sense of mystery that draws her closer. But if she's sensitive or insecure, your silence might only confirm her worst fears. Perhaps that she's not important to you, or that you're investing your time in someone else. This can push her away for good rather than pulling her back in. In many cases, men underestimate how much silent tension can escalate emotions. Ignoring someone doesn't just press pause on the conversation. It can ramp up anxiety, fear, and even anger. Without clear communication, misunderstandings multiply. By the time you finally decide to speak again, you could be facing a much bigger conflict than the one you started with. The original reason for your silence may be lost under layers of hurt feelings and assumptions. Another crucial misstep is using silence without a clear purpose. If you withdraw with no real reflection or intention of understanding your own feelings, you're just leaving a vacuum. She might try to fill that emptiness with speculation, which can lead her imagination to run wild. Without some direction, like, I need a bit of time to think, but I'm not disappearing forever, the quiet can feel indefinite and punishing. Then, when you do reappear, it might seem random or insincere. A calmer, more self-aware approach is essential. Instead of slamming the door shut, it's often better to briefly communicate why you're taking a step back. That doesn't mean you have to write a long explanation. Even a simple message like, I'm feeling overwhelmed and need some space to sort out my thoughts. I'll reach out when I'm ready, can help her understand the situation. That way, she's not left guessing, and you're not sabotaging the relationship with a total blackout. Men also need to be cautious about their own emotional triggers. If you're ignoring her because you're upset, make sure you're not letting anger or pride dictate your actions. Ask yourself, what do I really want from this silence? If the answer is, I want her to realize I'm serious about my boundaries, then perhaps a gentle but firm statement of those boundaries would be more effective than abruptly going mute. If the answer is, I want her to miss me, then you're treading on manipulative territory, which seldom results in a healthy outcome. It's also worth noting that sometimes men confuse silence with confidence. True confidence doesn't come from withholding communication. It comes from knowing your worth and being secure enough to address problems calmly. Silence can be a tool for self-reflection, but if you're using it just to prove a point, the effect might be the opposite of what you intended. Real confidence is often displayed by a willingness to have open, honest dialogue, even when that dialogue is uncomfortable. Now, as we pause to consider these pitfalls, let's reflect on how women's responses can be vastly different depending on their personalities. Not every woman reacts the same way to silence. Some might respond by chasing harder, others might walk away without looking back. Others could interpret your silence in a way you never intended. That's why understanding the various personality types and how they deal with being ignored can offer valuable insight. So, let's look at how different women, whether they're emotionally immature, self-assured, or even manipulative, respond when met with a wall of quiet. This will help clarify why a one-size-fits-all silent approach is bound to stumble. The different responses based on personality type. Every woman is a unique blend of experiences, values, and emotions. When you go silent, her reaction will be shaped by who she is at her core. Let's explore a few broad categories. keeping in mind that real people don't fit into neat little boxes. But these categories can shed light on why certain personalities respond the way they do. Consider someone who is emotionally immature. She might struggle with managing her feelings in a balanced way. When silence hits, she may panic quickly. Her first instinct could be to assume the worst. "He hates me now," or "I messed up everything." Because she hasn't fully developed the tools to handle conflict, she might react with frantic messages or dramatic behavior, hoping to get a response from you. This can feel overwhelming if you simply needed time to yourself. In her mind, your silence is a rejection of who she is as a person, rather than a temporary pause. On the other side of the spectrum is the self-assured woman who carries a strong sense of self-worth. If she's reached a point in her life where she values emotional health and balanced communication, your silence might initially surprise her, but it won't necessarily send her spiraling. She could take a step back and think, maybe he needs space, and that's okay. Or she might calmly reach out asking, is everything all right? If no answer comes, she may decide to respect your silence while also respecting herself. That means she won't chase you indefinitely. She'll give you room for a while, but if you remain distant too long, she'll assume you're not invested. Then she'll move on with minimal drama. For a self-assured woman, silence is not a devastating blow. It's more like a signal about where you stand. Now let's talk about someone whose response can be far more calculated: the manipulative personality. If a woman tends to use emotional tactics to get what she wants, she might see your silence as a puzzle to solve or a game to win. Instead of feeling hurt or panicked, she might think, he's ignoring me, so how can I turn this to my advantage? She could start crafting strategies to lure you back, such as posting photos meant to spark jealousy or sending ambiguous texts that hint she's moving on. She might even pretend she doesn't notice your absence, just to see if it provokes you to break your own silence. This approach can become an emotional chess match, where neither side is truly communicating openly and genuine feelings get lost in the shuffle of tactics. There's also the woman who combines traits from multiple categories. She might have moments of emotional immaturity, periods of strong self-assurance, and occasional manipulative tendencies, depending on her mood or past experiences. For instance, she could initially be upset and react with anxious messages, then shift into a more composed state of waiting, and finally resort to subtle manipulation if she feels desperate. Understanding that people are complex can help you see why silence rarely has a single, predictable outcome. In each of these scenarios, the key factor is perception. How she interprets your silence is shaped by her personality. The emotionally immature woman might perceive silence as abandonment. The self-assured woman might see it as your need for solitude, and the manipulative one might view it as a challenge to outmaneuver. In any case, your intention, be it a genuine need for space or a deliberate test, can get lost in translation if you're not clear about what's really going on. This is where empathy comes into play. Sometimes, taking a moment to consider her perspective can guide you toward a more constructive approach. For instance, if you suspect she struggles with emotional immaturity, a brief but kind explanation might ease her fears without dragging you into an argument. If she's self-assured, she may appreciate honesty. You could say, "I'm feeling overwhelmed and need some time to think. I respect you, so I wanted you to know," which prevents needless confusion. If you believe she tends toward manipulation, you might choose to maintain your boundaries firmly, ensuring you're not drawn into a cycle of emotional games. One thing is certain: a universal silence policy won't work for everyone. Imagine a high-value woman who respects herself, receiving no communication or explanation from you. She might interpret this as a red flag. He can't communicate like an adult, and decide she deserves a more emotionally mature partner. Meanwhile, an emotionally immature partner might chase you obsessively, creating more drama. and a manipulative type might use your silence as an excuse to manipulate you in return. Each scenario ends differently, largely because each personality type processes silence through a different lens. That's why you need clarity about your own purpose and boundaries before you decide to go quiet. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely need time to reflect, or am I using it to avoid confrontation? Am I hoping she'll chase me, or do I just want space to breathe? Self-reflection can help you sidestep the pitfalls we discussed earlier. It ensures you're not blindly employing silence as a one-size-fits-all tactic. Now let's pause for a moment and consider a very different approach, the Stoic way of handling these situations. While silence can sometimes be useful, there's a mindset that goes beyond mere quiet. Stoicism emphasizes calm control of your own emotions, not as a game or manipulation, but as a genuine practice of self-mastery. Instead of ignoring her purely out of frustration or revenge, a Stoic approach focuses on staying centered, avoiding impulsive reactions, and communicating thoughtfully when the time is right. Let's gently move on to that perspective and see how a Stoic mindset can shift the entire dynamic, both for you and for anyone on the receiving end of your silence. The Stoic response. Imagine standing in the midst of chaos, yet keeping your composure as if you're in a tranquil garden. That's the essence of the Stoic response. It's not about shutting down your emotions or becoming cold. It's about being so grounded in your own sense of self that external events, like someone else's reactions or even their silence, don't rock your inner stability. When a woman ignores you or tests you after you've pulled away, the Stoic approach is to remain calm and intentional, rather than letting fear or anger dictate your actions. First and foremost, a Stoic recognizes what is within their control. You can't always control how someone else feels or reacts, but you can control how you respond. This is where calmness plays a vital role. Instead of jumping to conclusions or panicking because she hasn't replied to your message, you take a moment to breathe and remind yourself that your self-worth doesn't hinge on another person's attention. This isn't about being aloof or uncaring. It's about respecting your own emotional equilibrium. When you adopt a Stoic mindset, you learn to observe your own impulses. Perhaps you feel the urge to send multiple texts in a row, demanding an explanation for her silence. But instead of succumbing to that urge, you recognize it for what it is, an emotional reaction that might not serve your long-term well-being. So, you let the impulse pass, waiting for a time when your head is clearer. This sense of self-restraint is powerful. It sends a message to your own mind that you are in control, and it also subtly communicates to her that you won't be easily rattled. Stoicism doesn't mean ignoring your partner indefinitely. Rather, it's about deliberate communication. When you do decide to speak, your words carry sincerity and calm. You might say, "I noticed we haven't been talking much lately. I respect your space, but I'm also open to discussing anything on your mind." This balanced statement shows that you're neither needy nor indifferent. You acknowledge the silence without projecting blame or desperation. In practical terms, a Stoic stays busy with personal growth during quiet spells. Instead of pacing around the room, wondering why she hasn't called, you focus on areas of your life that matter: your work, your hobbies, your health. This serves two purposes. It keeps your mind occupied and positive, and it also reinforces the reality that your life is full regardless of her immediate presence. When you do re-engage, you're doing so from a place of strength, not emptiness. Another aspect of Stoicism is emotional honesty. If you feel hurt by her silence, you don't lie to yourself or pretend it doesn't sting. You acknowledge it, let yourself feel the discomfort, and then remind yourself that pain is often a part of growth. You ask, what can I learn from this? Maybe you realize you need better communication from the start, or that you need to express your boundaries more clearly. By turning the focus inward, you transform a potentially negative experience into a chance to become more emotionally mature. When she does reach out, a Stoic approach avoids sarcasm or passive-aggressive remarks. Instead, you might simply say, "I'm glad to hear from you again. How are you feeling?" This gentle openness invites genuine conversation. If she's been testing you, she might find it harder to provoke you because you're not reacting in the way she expected. If she truly needed space, she'll see that you respected her boundaries without holding it against her. Either way, the dialogue stands on healthier ground. It's also worth noting that the Stoic mindset isn't a trick to get her to come chasing after you. It's genuinely for your own peace of mind. The moment you start viewing Stoicism as a tactic, you lose its essence. True Stoic calm is about self-regulation, not manipulation. You remain steady whether she comes back or not, because you've cultivated a sense of completeness within yourself. This steadiness can be very appealing to others, but the real benefit is how it safeguards your well-being. By practicing this approach, you're also sending a message that any future communication will be based on mutual respect rather than emotional games. You establish a precedent. We can handle silence, disagreements, or uncertainty in a mature way. Over time, this can build a foundation of trust, because both people know that conflicts won't result in destructive blowouts or endless days of guesswork. Now, as we come to the end of discussing the Stoic response, you may be wondering about the practical outcome of staying so calm. Does she come back when you fully embrace this mindset? And if she does, how will you know it's genuine? Let's take a soft pause and look at what happens when the silence stretches on, and whether she's likely to return once the dust settles. Will she come back? So, you've maintained your composure during this period of quiet. You've done your best to stay grounded, keeping your life in motion without letting worry consume you. Now the question arises, will she return after your silence or after hers? The answer varies, and it often depends on what the connection meant to both of you in the first place and how each person handles conflict or distance. Let's start with a typical scenario where genuine feelings exist on both sides. If your silence was about taking a breather rather than punishing her, she might eventually sense that your pause wasn't an act of hostility. Over time, as she deals with her own emotions, she could come to appreciate that you didn't flood her with endless messages or pressure. She might realize this space was beneficial, allowing her to process her doubts or frustrations without feeling cornered. Little signs of her willingness to reconnect might pop up. A casual text to see how you're doing, a spontaneous call, or even a random social media comment meant to gauge your mood. If she does reach out, it often indicates that she values the bond enough to rebuild communication. On the other hand, if she never contacts you again, it may reflect a deeper disinterest or incompatibility. As harsh as that sounds, it's better to know sooner rather than later that the connection wasn't as solid as you hoped. By respecting your own boundaries and not chasing someone who remains silent indefinitely, you safeguard your emotional well-being. Yes, it can hurt to watch someone fade away, but it also spares you from clinging to a relationship where you're the only one investing energy. Sometimes she might come back cautiously, testing the waters to see if you're upset or indifferent. Maybe she'll send a short message that says, "Hey, it's been a while. How have you been?" Pay attention to the tone. If it feels curious and genuine, that's a good sign. She might be checking if you're open to talking again. If it feels cold or forced, she might just be wrapping up loose ends. Regardless, your Stoic mindset helps you respond with calm kindness. Something like, "I've been well, thanks for asking. Hope you're doing okay too," can open the door to a real conversation without jumping straight into heavy topics. The real insight into whether she values you is often found in her consistency. Does she continue to make an effort after that first contact? or does she drop off the grid again? A sincere return is marked by follow-through, asking questions, showing interest, or suggesting a meetup. A half-hearted return might involve a single text followed by more silence. In that case, she could be seeking reassurance or closure rather than genuinely wanting to reconnect. For some, the silence can lead to a heartfelt conversation about what went wrong. Perhaps she'll say, "I missed talking to you, but I felt unsure about where we stood." You might respond by calmly explaining why you needed space. This moment can become a turning point, an opportunity to establish healthier communication patterns. If you both approach it with honesty, the relationship might emerge stronger than before. After all, surviving a period of silence without hostility can foster a deeper sense of trust. However, in cases where she was mainly playing games or seeking validation, her return might come with manipulative undertones. She might try to spark jealousy or guilt trip you for going silent in the first place. If you sense this happening, your best move is to stick with the clarity and self-control you've cultivated. A simple statement like, "I'm open to discussing whatever's on your mind, but I'm not interested in blame or unnecessary drama," sets a boundary. If she respects that boundary, you might find a path to real understanding. If she scoffs or continues with manipulative tactics, it's a clue that the connection might be too unhealthy to pursue. Throughout all these possibilities, remember that silence is not meant to be a magic trick. It's a pause that can reveal truths, both about her feelings and about your own. Yes, she might come back with open arms, or she might slip away entirely. Either outcome can be a chance for growth if you keep your perspective aligned with self-respect and honest communication. This mindset ensures you're not relying on her return for your sense of worth. When she does come back, observe her actions more than her words. Is she genuinely apologetic if she did something hurtful? Does she acknowledge any misunderstandings she contributed to? Is she willing to hear your side without defensiveness? These are the signs that indicate she's returning for the right reasons. If the silence was long or painful, it may take time to rebuild trust, and that's okay. The key is a mutual willingness to move forward in a healthier way. Finally, remember that you're not trying to win by staying silent. It's about exercising self-control and emotional maturity. If she returns, great. Let the new chapter be guided by clearer understanding. If she doesn't, you haven't lost anything except a connection that might not have been as solid as you thought. It's all part of respecting yourself and respecting her freedom to choose what she really wants. Let's take a moment now and wrap up our conversation with a strong reminder of why silence should be more about self-control than manipulation. We'll close things out with a call to action, but also with a heartfelt invitation for your own personal stories. Relationships thrive on shared experiences and lessons learned, so I'd love to hear how you've navigated silent moments in your past and what you discovered in the process. We've walked through a journey that started with the unsettling feeling of being ignored and led us through a maze of thoughts, emotions, and responses. In the end, the real message stands clear. Silence can be a powerful space for reflection, but it should never be wielded like a weapon. When you choose to go quiet, let it be because you value calmness, clarity, and inner peace, not because you want to punish or manipulate someone else. This mindset is essentially Stoic at heart, focusing on self-control, emotional balance, and respect for everyone involved. By keeping your composure, you give yourself and the other person time to breathe, to consider what truly matters, and to decide whether reconnecting is in both of your best interests. You also avoid the downward spiral of impulsive reactions or heated words that can't be taken back. In a world that seems to move faster every day, these moments of thoughtful silence can become an oasis of calm. Before we say goodbye, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Your support means so much, and it helps us continue these honest, open conversations. And if you found any insight or comfort in what we discussed, please click that like button. It might seem like a small gesture, but it's a wonderful way to let us know you value this kind of content. I'm also genuinely curious about your experiences. When was the last time you used silence in a relationship, and how did it play out for you? Did it bring clarity, create more confusion, or teach you a lesson about yourself or your partner? Sharing your story in the comments can help others realize they're not alone. Sometimes the smallest personal anecdote can be exactly what someone else needs to hear. As we wrap up, remember that silence is not the end of the conversation. It's a pause that can lead to greater understanding if used wisely. Remain authentic to yourself, stay open to honest communication, and respect your own emotional well-being along the way. Ultimately, that's where real connection begins, not in the noise, but in the calm acceptance of who you are and what you want in a relationship. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. I hope you carry these insights with you, not just in matters of love, but in all your interactions where silence can speak volumes. Until next time, take care, stay self-aware, and keep that inner peace alive.